Okay, so a lot of us have seen Piers Morgan. I was never a huge fan. Okay, and he was a staunch supporter of Israel at the beginning of all of this, around October 7th, and he had a conversation with Tucker Carlson where he was arguing back and forth with Tucker and defending Israel, and Israel's right to defend itself. But at some point, he realized that things were disproportionate. That even if it were, let's say, 1,400 people, civilians that were killed by Hamas on October 7th, that 20,000 kids and 67,000 civilians is not a just response. So this is a really good show where he talks to some people. Now, this is an hour long, so we're going to be here a while. So I hope you stick with me because there's some important things here and some great information. But even though I've seen Piers kind of, switch and move more toward, not being supportive of Israel and what they're doing, he still doesn't have his numbers correct. Like at the end of the day, and it's still civilians. So directly killed by Hamas was about 300 civilians. The rest of the people killed on October 7th were by Israel, even the Israelis that were killed. Like I said, if you go over to altmiddlepodcast.com, there's an article I did regarding the Hannibal Directive that was implemented on October 7th. And this is widely known. It is public information. The defense minister even said it himself in an interview that it was implemented. And so I have video footage over on locals that shows Apache helicopters firing into the Nova Festival. There were witnesses at the Nova Festival that said that they had their hands up and the Apaches were still firing upon them. That's why you have all the charred cars and completely destroyed cars. One witness said that cars were blowing up next to them while they were running. RPGs and AK-47s or AR-15s or whatever it was Hamas had cannot do that kind of damage. I mean, the ground was completely charred in that area. So, and there's a propaganda film that I saw about the Nova Festival itself. And one of the girls is sitting there doing kind of a little vlog with her phone while all this is going on. And you can hear the Apache helicopters in the distance firing. So, that is pretty well known at this point. Some political, like Politico, I think it was, or Snopes or something came out and tried to debunk that. But then an Israeli soldier came out and said that they were told to hose down anything that moved. So that narrative is getting out. And then you have the narrative getting out about the soldiers essaying a Palestinian prisoner, which is a common thing there. And then basically when they tried to save face and give hold the soldiers accountable, people uprose and said, no, they have the right to do that. And they should have the right to do that. And so the soldiers are let free, and the woman who leaked the video is arrested, and who knows how she's being treated in prison. So this is an important thing because this kind of tells you like the goal of Israel, because the goal of Israel all along has been to cleanse Gaza. They have wanted this so bad for so long. Since their inception, they have been doing this. This is not something that started on October 7th. If you go back and watch, there's plenty of videos and documentaries of how this has happened from the very beginning. And there's actually a movie coming out in theaters that I really want to see. And I think it's called Palestine 39 or Palestine 36, something like that, which is the story about how this all happened and what has been happening to Palestinians from the beginning. Now, don't forget that area was Palestinians and Christians, so Arabs and Christians for the longest time. I mean, the Palestinians are the original Canaanites. In most cases, you've been fed a narrative, and most people's narrative starts on October 7th. They have no previous, knowledge of anything pre-October 7th. They don't care. It is what it is. But if you really want to understand, you have to be willing to get context. You have to be willing to look at history and go back and do your due diligence and research and see what has actually happened. Same with the same thing going on in Ukraine and Russia. If you don't have the context before Russia's liberation, I call it, not an invasion, their liberation. If you don't know the context or the history of why that even happened, then you should not be entering the conversation because you don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what you're talking about. When you put your Ukrainian flag on your bio, you don't have any idea what you're actually representing and don't know the history and the context of it. So context is important. And so the reason I want you to watch this with me with Piers Morgan is because this will show you like what is actually going on there and the mindset of the Israeli government, Netanyahu's government. And in many ways, it's so disgusting. So I'm going to let it play as much as possible without interrupting. But you know me, I have a tendency to want to drop in some stuff here and there. But let's watch it.
President Trump wants a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war, and he wants it to be as soon as this week. Well, frankly, it can't come soon enough. Thousands of Palestinians have been killed since the last ceasefire broke down, including a series of shocking incidents at aid centres. More than 50 hostages remain in Hamas captivity, at least 20 of them believed to be still alive. This weekend, Israeli settlers attacked an Israeli military base in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The opposition says they're emboldened by expansionist hardliners in Netanyahu's government. Well, coming up, I'll talk to one of the most controversial ministers in Israel's government, and we'll debate the terms of what happens next. But first, I'm joined by British doctor Mohammed Mustafa, known to many of his followers as the Beast from the Middle East, who has first-hand experience in Gaza. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
You were grimacing when I read your nickname there, the Beast in the Middle East.
Yeah.
But that is your unofficial title, right?
Yeah. I've been called a few names in my time, but that's one that seems to have stuck around.
Why that? What's that about?
Well, I used to play like a lot of sports. I used to play professional rugby, and a couple of the lads came up with that name, and it's just kind of stuck ever since. And then, it was my Instagram handle for such a long time, and then I started to go viral, and I thought it was too late to change it then. So I guess I'm the Beast from the Middle East.
We're going to get to incredible stuff you've done in Gaza, but you were telling me off camera, it's fascinating. Tom Aspinall, the UFC guy's a great mate of yours, and you've done lots of training with him. You've actually sparred with Tyson Fury too.
Well, in Thailand, I accidentally caught him, and that was really scary because when I caught him, he was such a sport about it though that I accidentally hit him in the face. So fair play to him. But yeah, I've done a lot of training around the world with MMA and jiu-jitsu, and obviously I've played professional rugby as well. So I've done quite a bit of sports.
The relevance, I guess, is it's made you a tough guy, and capable of dealing with a lot of stuff. Had anything prepared you for what you encountered in Gaza?
Do you know, Gaza is an extremely difficult place to go into. I've been there now multiple times since the start of this war. I remember, the first time going in there, we arrived at about 6 o'clock and there was an airstrike at a residential house, and we walked in to the morgue. And I remember opening up the body bags because the other extended family were there to identify the bodies. And when you just open up body bags and it's organs of children, missing heads, missing limbs, 80% body burns. And there were family members coming in, picking up pieces of an arm and identifying the body just by the ring. And, that was literally the first 30 minutes I was in Gaza, and instantly you know that this is something that's, you'll never be prepared for something like that.
Had you ever come across anything like this?
Not to this scale, not to this scale. The level of destruction, we would drive from the European hospital to Nasser hospital, and there would be about 4 buildings standing. And it was just rubble, and people were living in and amongst this rubble. It was really, and the drones are constantly overhead. Every day, children are coming in, injured, killed, burnt alive, and that's constant. And there's always the risk that you could be killed as well.
I mean, it sounds extraordinary when you say that children are coming in every day, literally all the time.
Yeah. The second time that I was there a few days into a few days before the ceasefire broke, and we would actually see children come in with gunshot wounds to the neck and head. They'd been sniped neck and head. We saw last year in June children that had been starved to death, children that were coming in starving to death in June last year. So forget about, this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation now and the starvation that you see. We were seeing that in June last year. And
and I want to touch on the fact that, like, if they're coming in with bullet wounds to the chest and the head, that literally means they were targeted. Okay, so you have Israel trying to defend this by saying, "Oh, they're just, collateral damage because buildings have fallen on them or whatever." We're not actively killing children. We're not disgusting people. But if a child has a bullet wound in the head, okay, that means they were specifically targeted, which means a sniper took them out. Now, that's the same thing that happened to the American journalist that was over there in Gaza doing reporting, and she was shot in the head, and I believe shot multiple times. And Israel denied it. They said that it was Hamas firing down an alleyway kind of thing. And when they investigated, they found that was absolutely impossible. And then they did do an investigation and found out that it was indeed an IDF assassin or a sniper that took her out. And they actually, what was it, Al Jazeera, I believe, or some organization did an investigation and actually found the IDF soldier that had done it. Now, he had died in another battle, but he was actually promoted after that. And other IDF soldiers were using her picture as target practice. So, the fact that they say that they're, they're just the most humane and the most, taking out the least amount of people possible is an absolute lie when you have babies and children coming in with bullet wounds to the head and chest. That is just the most disgusting human beings on earth. But when you are a superior race, how they see themselves as superior to Arabs, they think of them as less than animals. It makes it easy for those assassins, those snipers, to take those shots because they don't see them as human. They think they are doing the world a service by taking them out because they can grow up to be adult Arabs, which is the same argument that Ukraine made when Western Ukraine is shooting and killing and dropping pedal mines in parks where ethnic Russians, or in Eastern Ukraine, which they were Ukrainians, but they were ethnic Russians where they were playing because they said that they would grow up to be adult Russians. So it's the same mindset. It's this supremacy that some of these people have, which is why I just argue, why religion is so, ideologies are so poison to this world, because it makes people think, because their God, they think their God is superior and it's the right one, that they are superior to any other religion and any other people because they don't believe the same thing that they do. And it's a disgusting way to think, and why I just despise religion and what it's done to this world.
To go back 9 months later and still see children starving to death, that's what really hits home, is when you see that how prolonged and sustained this campaign of violence and violence against children. It's been it's quite difficult.
You are the son of a Gazan refugee.
Yeah.
Your dad was a refugee.
Yeah.
He's here in the UK. He's become one of the top fertility doctors in the country, which is an amazing story.
Yeah.
For any refugee, but particularly one from Gaza.
Yeah.
What were your memories growing up with your dad? Did he talk to you much about the conflict, the problems?
My dad's one of my heroes. When he was born in Gaza, he used to wear the US aid flour bags as his trousers. Didn't own a pair of shoes till he was about 13 years old. He lived in absolute poverty, but he built himself up. He became a doctor. And it was through that profession of healthcare and watching him every day go to work, working late, to not just support our family, but to support family back home in Gaza. And I really looked up to him. And, I was reflecting on this a lot the other day. My father has been responsible for around 20,000 children being born in this country that wouldn't have been born because of, his high skill level in fertility medicine. And I just think to myself, there's been over 20,000 children that have been killed in Gaza. How much did he take that? He's brought so much life to this country, and yet he's watching his own country be absolutely destroyed. What
does he feel about that?
My father's health has declined a lot in the last 2 years. I really worry about him. Me, myself, and I don't talk about this very often, but, we've had dozens of family members killed during this conflict. Dozens of family killed during this conflict. We've also had, dozens of family members killed generationally. I've had family members killed in 2014. I've had family members killed 20 years ago. I've had family members killed 30 years ago. I've had family members that were killed in hospitals when hospitals were bombed in the 50s and the 60s in Gaza. So, this whole thing, and, I don't want to put you on the spot, but, I remember when I was in Gaza and I'd watch some of, your debates and, you were saying that you were having a moral quandary over what was going on. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, it's not a moral quandary for me, and it's not a moral quandary for millions of people around the world. Like, we're sat here and I'm putting headless children and I'm handing them over to mothers, and they're hugging them and they're putting them into body bags. When we have a mass casualty event, I'm stepping over children as they're bleeding out to death on the floor because I know we don't have the medical equipment to treat them. When I'm trying to use an ultrasound machine to do a scan on someone, the cords have been cut because Israeli soldiers have cut the cords of ultrasound machines. I've had family members who have died because the dialysis machines are filled with bullet holes. So, just to put it into context, the first 24 days of this conflict, 1,900 children were killed in the first 24 days.
And remember, like, the whole thing that got us into the Iraq war, like, were the propaganda stories of the babies in incubators. When it starts to carry over to babies, people seem to care more, which makes sense because they are the epitome of innocence. Babies and children are the epitome of innocence. And when you start to target that demographic, the babies and the children, that's when people get up in arms. And I believe that is why a lot of people are changing sides on this issue, because they're realizing that this response is not proportionate to what happened on October 7th, even if the numbers were accurate, even if Hamas came in and legitimately killed 1,400 Israelis. That does not justify the murder of 20,000 children. Again, I've said this many times, but understand that the population of Gaza is 50% people under 18. 50%. So when you see these numbers of 67,000, I have literally seen the numbers as high as 600,000. And 100,000 is from verified sources, because they're counting only what they've found, not everybody that's lost under the rubble, that's still unclaimed. Like, there are a lot of people that still have not been found. The only verified numbers are those that they have found, and it's verified 20,000 children and verified 67,000 people. Now, that was, I can't remember what month that was, but we have not gotten updated numbers in a while. And I would argue Israel is probably blocking people from going and getting those official numbers. And then if they do get official numbers that are anything higher than what they want them to be, they will say, well, Hamas is doing the counting, so you can't trust that. So they don't want these numbers coming out. And Israel is freaking out because they're getting ready to have to let journalists into Gaza in order to see what's going on. And if that happens, we're going to see a lot more. And I think a lot more people are going to change sides once they realize what's been going on here. And don't forget the fact that, everybody's up in arms about October 7th, but the Trump administration, Jared Kushner, I don't know that Jared is part of the Trump administration, but Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff talked on October 10th, 3 days after October 7th, how they have had a plan for 2 years to build properties and stuff on the Gaza Strip.
You're builders. You've been in real estate. Tell us more about the plan and how much it's going to cost. Where's the money going to come from? And who's going to award the contracts?
I think it's going to cost a lot of money.
What's a lot of money?
The estimates are in the $50 billion range. It might be a little bit less. It might be a little bit more. I happen to think that that's not a lot of money in that region. You have governments that are going to jump on in.
Middle East countries are going to provide the money.
But you'll see European participation and so forth. The beginning of this plan is how to get it going. That's what me and Jared work on all the time. The money raising, we think, is the easy part, but it's the master plan. And we're working with a group of people who have been working on master plans for the last 2 years.
So there are plans already.
Yeah. We have plans already. We have a master plan already. And by the way, and Jared's been pushing this, and we're working together on it. And I think if the world saw the progress so far, they'd be pretty impressed.
So this was planned. This was all pre-planned. And if you don't realize that by now, you need to, check your sources and just come to the realization. It's not easy to do. It is really not easy to come to the realization that you've been wrong and change sides when you might have been arguing about it this whole time. It's never it's like egg on your face, that somebody else may have been right and you might have been wrong. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's better to swallow that pill and just admit that you were wrong and admit that you were misled, because it's easy to get misled with all this propaganda. It really is. If you don't, not somebody that knows how to go down rabbit holes and doesn't know how to really do research and look into these matters, it's okay to admit it. It's better to admit it instead of planting a flag and continuing to support a genocide. It's disgusting what's going on over there.
That's more than any other conflict anywhere around the world in a whole year, and in this tiny population of Gaza. And I think anybody like me or any Palestinians or anyone really that knows the situation, they knew what was coming, and we knew what was happening when they were calling, them human animals and Amalek, and we're going to cut off food, water, and electricity, and 1,900 children killed in a dozen or so days.
Well, and also another thing that people don't realize is like the occupation itself. So this is way before October 7th. Has nothing to do with October 7th. They limited water, they limited electricity, they limited everything to Gazans. They checked everything that went in and everything that went out. Every person that went in, every person that went out. They have surveillance that has the face of every Palestinian, so they know who exactly is coming to the border. They need to know why. Like, they are in an open air prison and have been for centuries, decades. I mean, decades, not centuries, decades. And so even if Hamas uprose and did what they did, they have been prisoners for decades and treated like this, with limited water and limited food and limited everything, not allowed to own weapons, anything. They are a controlled and occupied people who love life, like all of us. They value life and they value freedom, and they deserve freedom, as we all do. As you would say, it is our God-given right, but they didn't have that. They weren't allowed that. So, it doesn't like justify, what Hamas may have done on October 7th, but if you understand the history, you can understand how you get radicalized enough to get there in order to get to that position to where you're ready to take life because you're tired of having your freedom controlled and taken away from you and being limited on your supplies, your food, your water, and all that stuff.
I think we all knew what was coming.
But when you say you knew what was coming, just to be clear, my moral quandary was really that I felt after October the 7th, Israel didn't just have a right to defend itself, but a duty.
Yeah.
A terror attack of that scale, 1,200 people killed, nearly 7,000 more wounded, 250 plus kidnapped, grandmothers, babies, I mean, Holocaust survivors. It was on such a horrific scale. Obviously, Israel was going to respond with force. My quandary was simply, at what point is this a proportionate response? And I didn't know the answer. I do now.
Yes.
I've been saying for a few months now that what is happening now is beyond, to me, any kind of proportionate response. And it seems to be never ending. And that's why this has to end. But going back to October the 7th, notwithstanding, obviously, you're the son of a Gaza refugee, and of course that will inform how you view things. But none of this would be happening in the way it's been happening without what Hamas did that day. So what do you feel about what Hamas inflicted on its own people by doing what it did?
Okay, I just want to say to that where he says none of this would be happening. It has been happening, Piers. This has been happening. This has been happening way before October 7th, way before. And so to say that just shows that you are not educated in this matter. Because this, like I said, this has been going on for decades. There have been all kinds of ceasefires, and Israel has not upheld a single one of them. So if you're constantly provoked, eventually you're going to snap. You're going to snap. So I feel like it's like, Piers, you're so close. You're so close. You're like this close to getting it. You're close to understanding, but you're not all the way there. And you really need to get all the way there because this is not a good thing. All right, let's go back.
Of that is a little bit problematic. Like what Hamas did to its own people. What's been going on didn't start on October the 7th. It's been 75 years. And I can attest to that because I was ethnically cleansed out of Gaza and so was my family, So it didn't start on October the 7th. What do I think about October 7th? Horrific. Taking of women and children as hostages, killing innocent people. As a Palestinian, I know how much that hurts. So all I have is nothing but sympathy for the people who suffered on October the 7th. But at the same time, people started this story on October the 7th. And for me, growing up in poverty, growing up without running water in the house, growing up watching, us have to give up our savings all the time to support family back in Gaza and back. For me, it never started on October the 7th. For me, it started every day when I was being bullied at school. It started when I had to move from city to city because my dad never got a permanent job. Those are the kind of things where, I look at it and there was a lot of emotions on October the 7th, as a Palestinian.
Did any part of you feel it was justified? I've heard some people categorize what they did as resistance, which is a justification for what happened. I don't think you can do that. I mean, to me, it was an appalling terrorist attack. And the reason I framed the question the way I did was that when it later turned out that Hamas had this huge tunnel system where they all hid, but the civilians were left to be under the raining bombs from Israel, which were inevitably going to come, given the scale of what Hamas did. That's what I meant by the way I phrased the question, which is how much do Palestinian people, when they look back on that, how much do they blame Hamas for inevitably bringing this on them?
Yeah, I mean, look, before Hamas, it was the PLO.
Right.
And before the PLO, it was the Egyptians, and before then, it was somebody else. Look, at the end of the day, the root cause is the problem. The root cause is the occupation. The root cause is inequality. The root cause is that I don't have the right to return to my home, that my father doesn't have the right to return, that my grandfather is buried in Gaza, my dad's never been able to go see him. When we talk about the root causes, when we talk about, what Hamas did on October the 7th, this is just a cycle. And the cycle always comes back to, instead of looking at the symptoms, I don't want to look at the symptoms, I want to look at the causes. The causes is inequality, is a lack of justice, and I just want justice for the Palestinian people. And I don't want that justice to be violence and killing of innocent Israelis.
You want the same human rights.
I just want the same human rights.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible? I mean, I liken it sometimes to what happened in Northern Ireland, where for decades people thought this could never get resolved. People living amongst each other, loyalists and IRA, but eventually they got there. They got to peace. Do you think it's possible to end up with a two-state solution where Palestinians live with the same rights as Israelis?
Well, look, I think the Israelis are making it very difficult to have a two-state solution. With the expansion of settlements in the West Bank and moving in...
Which is appalling.
Which is moving in millions of settlers. It's making a two-state solution impossible. Really, what's going to happen is eventually there'll be a one-state solution with equality for Muslims and Jews and anybody else living on that land. And eventually Palestinians will have the right to return. And they will return back to Palestine. And I feel like, it's kind of ironic, really, because they've avoided so much in giving the Palestinians a state and a home. And they've tried to destroy this two-state solution, that eventually what will happen is a one-state solution. And eventually the majority that they've tried to build by ethnically cleansing, by taking up more and more land, will go away, because eventually the Palestinians will return home. And eventually, given all the Palestinian refugees all around the world, eventually the Palestinians will outnumber the Jewish population. And that's, I think, what's worrying them. And I think what needs to happen is there either needs to be a conversation where you need to have a proper two-state solution, or it needs to be a one-state solution. But questions need to be asked, and governments need to come in and help, because we can't...
Do Arab countries do enough? It seems to me they kind of hold back and say, this is not our problem.
Well, and I want to touch on that really quick, what he was saying. Like, the whole reason Israel is where it is right now is because Israel, Jews deserve to have their own state, okay? I can get behind that. They do deserve to have their own state. But so do Palestinians. And Palestinians were already there. They were already living there for thousands of years. Like I said, they're the original Canaanites. Like, they are the Semites of that land, not the Israelis, most of them. Some of them are, but most of them are not. And so if Israel wants to argue that they have a right to exist, but deny that Palestinians have the right to exist, like that's hypocritical on its face. Like you're saying, we have more of a right to exist than they do. And like he's saying, they've been living in a prison with no freedom, limited resources. Like, you cannot treat a people like that and expect them to just sit there and take it forever. Because if you are a father and your children are suffering because of the occupation, because you can't give them water, you can't get them enough food, and you're eating, but yet, you know, you're still hungry because you're not getting enough food. They're not going to take that forever, because people will fight for their kids. If their kids are suffering, they will do what they have to do to help their kids. That's just the way humans are. We're not going to let our children suffer. And it's the same thing with the United States attacking all these places all over the world. What we do, we orphan children that know what happened, children that know that we took their family away from them. What are they going to grow up hating? Us. You know, you always hear this narrative, oh, the Iranians are yelling death to America. I would be yelling death to America too if I had been treated the way that they have been treated by this country. I would be yelling it too. I mean, based on what I'm seeing around the world, I hate my country. You know, I love, let me rephrase that. I love the country, but I hate the government. I hate what our government has done since, you know, the 40s and 50s, or how, I don't even know how far back it goes. I mean, even what we did to the Indians, it goes back to the beginning of our history with what we have done, the atrocities that we have committed. So, you know, I can understand them wanting to fight back. I can understand them getting to a point where an October 7th would happen. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments what you think about that.
Well, you know, look, Jordan has taken in millions of refugees, more than half the population are Palestinian. Lebanon has had civil wars with Palestinian resistance fighters in there before. You know, Syria has its own problems. Egypt has, you know, my dad was educated in Egypt. Egypt has taken in loads of Palestinian refugees before. The problem isn't the Arabs. It is problematic, you know, the lack of help and the lack of support. But the problem is that we have a expansionist regime which is extremely right-wing in Israel, that doesn't respect any borders, doesn't respect anyone's sovereignty.
And is now talking in openly genocidal language. I mean, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir in particular have made it clear they want to clear out Gaza of all the Palestinians.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a war crime. It's ethnic cleansing.
It is. And, you know, that's why, and, you know, the UN has been gutted as well. It's been defunded, it's been gutted, it's been delegitimized. And what I've been doing since I got back from Gaza is I've been trying to come up with solutions for what's going on. And, you know, I've been traveling around the world trying to get support for a children's hospital into Gaza. It's a children's hospital that we're going to build in Jordan. So the infrastructure is there in place already ready. We're going to build it in Jordan and drive it into Gaza and have a mobile hospital. Essentially, it's a hospital on wheels. It has an intensive care unit, wards, pathology labs, pharmacies. It's solar panel powered. It has running sewerage, waterworks. And you know, I've got the proposal here. It's ready to go. And I'm in the final stages of negotiations with the Mindaru Foundation to get funding for this hospital. We have a similar concept of this, a maternity and neonatal hospital, which is ready to go into Gaza as well. The reason why I'm saying that, why I've come with solutions and not just here just to talk and just rhetoric and, you know, people being unhappy and victim and this and this. I want a solution to this. Women and children are dying. Women and children are being funneled into cages and gunned down, hungry women and children. You can't have an army that's on trial for genocide to be also the one that controls access to food.
Do you believe the IDF are deliberately killing civilians? Because they always say, we're deliberately killing Hamas and civilians are dying in the process of us going after Hamas. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say that they killed their own hostages when they were waving white flags. They have bombed hospitals with people inside them. They left babies in incubators to rot to death. when they executed those 15 paramedics. I was in Gaza then, when they executed 15 paramedics and buried them alive.
And lied about it.
I was there when...
See, that's the real story of incubators, right? This is a legitimate story of incubators, not a propaganda campaign, because like Israel knew that if they, put out propaganda about babies in incubators, that people would get on board with the Iraq war, which they did, which ultimately they did, because you fuck with babies and people lose their shit, rightfully so.
I would have children coming in with explosive injuries and they would have bread in their hand. They were eating and they targeted them when they were eating. I would pick up children as young as 2 years old that had been shot in the head by snipers multiple times. So, when they talk about saying that they're only going after Hamas, I mean, you said it yourself. They've openly talked about ethnically cleansing the whole of Gaza. They're actively expanding settlements in the West Bank.
They say Hamas are in all the hospitals. Is that true?
Look, I've worked in all the hospitals. It'd be a very stupid thing to have a military base in the hospital. One, it's open access policy. Everyone can walk in and out of the hospital. Also, the hospital is full of injured women and children. The hospital's full of media. And also, the hospital is a base where all the international aid workers are. And, my concern when I go to Gaza is the children in Gaza. That's my concern. I don't want, there be any military operations out of there because it puts children in danger. But, I've not heard of a doctor that's come out and said that they've actively seen fighting or rockets being fired out of a hospital. It's not to say that something might have happened before. But again, you still can't throw the baby away with the dirty baby water. It's a hospital. And if you're going to bomb and destroy hospitals, which they've bombed 36 hospitals, then let me bring in my hospital. Let me bring in this. And what I'm trying to do with this hospital is I'm trying to make this a government-led initiative. I want the British government on board. I've got the Irish government on board. We met with President Michael Higgins. We've got the Australian government talking about this. We went to France yesterday to try and get the French government on board. Instead of having the Israelis running the aid, I want our governments to take a more active role. I don't want them to pay for this. I want them just to give us the access to get this hospital in and to allow British doctors, Australian doctors, Irish doctors, Canadian doctors in to have our hospital. This is our aid distribution centre. Just last week or a couple of weeks ago, the first children of Gaza arrived here in the UK. 2 of them arrived. That's the first time since this war started that 2 children have arrived. Yep. And, they're not bringing any more in. And I understand why the government don't want to bring more children in. One, you saw the race riots that happened in August in my town in Middlesbrough. People were pulled out of their cars if they were Muslim. Mosques were vandalised. Asylum seekers' hotels were burned down. I know for the government it's a touchy subject to bring in black and brown children into the UK. Well, this is a way we avoid that. Instead of bringing them here to be treated, let's bring a hospital here. And, it's not just the hospital that I've got. I've also got a plan here to feed the children of Gaza with instant aid. This is a comprehensive 2-year plan that not just feeds the children, it feeds them twice a day, nutrient-rich meals. This has been designed by executives that have worked for the World Food Programme and USA Aid. This is a Pious Projects hospital as well. I've got the answers here, and I've been speaking to government figures. I just need them to listen to me.
I'm about to interview one of the Israeli government. What would be your message for her?
I mean, she's the equality minister, isn't she? Look...
Why are you laughing when you say that?
Because it's kind of like a Black Mirror episode, Sometimes it's parody, it's a parody. I think everyone was watching in Glastonbury, just then what's happened in Glastonbury, the chants, right, death to the IDF, right?
What did you think of that?
Well, what I thought of that is just they are more concerned and more outraged by a chant than the actual crimes of the IDF.
Can't you be outraged by both? Because I was.
Look, you can be outraged by both.
Watching thousands of people at an English music festival chanting death to the IDF.
Yep.
I found that very unsettling. And I'm not Jewish.
Yeah.
If I was a British Jew watching that, I would feel very, very unnerved that a British audience like that. And the irony...
But that's the thing, if the IDF is going to commit these atrocities and admit to them that they fired on the Nova Festival goers, that they killed their own citizens, and the IDF has infiltrated, training with New York City police officers, and we don't know where else they've infiltrated. I've also seen stories that they are instigating some of these riots in these countries, our IDF, that are in there instigating and getting this to be a bigger thing than it is, so that more people get on board with, hey, maybe this is a problem for Israel. They're provoking it. So you can understand, you cannot commit a genocide and expect people to just be like, let's just not say anything. The Palestinians don't have a voice. They don't have media. Israel has killed 279, I believe, so far, journalists. I don't know the exact number, but it's around 300 journalists in Gaza, so that you don't get the information of what's actually happening. They don't want you to know. So Piers is saying this, but like, this is how you get there. This is how you get to where you hate a country, just like people hated Nazi Germany, hated Hitler for what he was doing. If World War II was going on right now and people were chanting that they hated the Nazis, would people say anything? Would people be like, they really shouldn't be, that really concerns me, they really shouldn't be saying that? No. And it's the exact same thing. Because Israel is committing a genocide and people are sick of it. People see it, people know it, and they're standing up for the Palestinians. Not for Hamas, like they want you to believe. You know, the Trump administration, anybody that's saying free Palestine, they're going to come after you. And I just heard a story of a journalist that is, talking about Palestinians and stuff that flew into the United States and is still in custody with the DOJ for no crime other than being critical of Israel. And they're deporting people, college students that are supporting and standing up for Palestinians and framing it as they're standing up and supporting Hamas, which is not true. It's propaganda, which means at some point they're going to start coming after all of us that are critical of Israel, all of us. It's inevitable. So the fact that these people are standing up, I support them. I support them standing up against the IDF, because the IDF are at the end of the day are the ones that are in there and aiming their guns willingly, intentionally at children and shooting them in the head. And like he said, a kid having bread in its hand, in a severed arm with a bread in its hand. Like, think about that. A child is sitting there eating and an IDF soldier shoots it or bombs it while it's eating. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. So good for these people standing up against that. Good for these people speaking out against that.
But of course, Hamas had obliterated young people at a music festival on October the 7th. I didn't like that.
Okay, again, Piers is wrong here. The majority of the people that were killed at the music festival were by Apache helicopters that were Israeli. Again, I have the videos, altmiddlepodcast.com. If you go there and scroll down, there's an article I did about the truth about October 7th. And the video is in there of them firing and an IDF soldier admitting that they were told to do that. They were told to hose down anything that moved. They didn't care, Israeli or Hamas. They didn't care. The Hannibal Directive. So, Piers still doesn't seem to know that side of the story. And maybe eventually he will. I'm glad he's having this conversation nonetheless. I'm glad people are seeing this. Piers Morgan Uncensored is a very popular show now on YouTube, and kudos to him for that. But he still has a little bit of waking up to do. You're almost there, Piers. You're almost there. You're getting there.
I think it's perfectly possible to think that is outrageous. But it's also perfectly possible to criticize the Israeli government for what they're doing in Gaza.
I mean, look, you're asking the wrong person about that, because I've had family members killed for generations by the IDF. I've had my home destroyed, my village burnt down by the IDF. I've held children who were riddled in bullets by the IDF. I've had to have children in a corner while their mother bled out to them on the floor and covered their own children in her blood as she died because of IDF bullets and IDF bombs. So, you know, when you ask these questions like, why are you asking a Palestinian who's been...
Well, I'll tell you why, because, for example, when the Iraq War happened,
yes,
my brother was a serving officer,
yes,
for example.
Yeah.
My issue was not with him.
Mm-hmm.
My issue, I campaigned against it,
yes,
as editor of the Daily Mirror.
Yes.
My issue is with Tony Blair and the Labour government that ordered him and his colleagues into battle. So I think blaming soldiers in war is, it's chicken and the egg. They're being ordered into battle.
Okay. But even if they're being ordered into battle, right? Even if they're being ordered into battle and they are taking it upon themselves to target a child, that's on the soldier. I don't care what orders I was given by my military. If the United States government told me, you're going to go into this village and you're going to kill everything that moves, and I came face to face with a child, I couldn't do it. I could not do it, and I would not do it. I wouldn't do it. I would refuse my orders. I would take a court martial. I would take whatever came my way, but I would not intentionally kill an innocent child. Even if the rhetoric was, well, they're going to grow up to be a terrorist. I don't give a shit. They're not a terrorist then. They're not a terrorist then. And people are like, well, but they could have bombs strapped to their body or whatever. You know what? That's adults putting that child in that situation, and I still couldn't kill it. If I were to be blown up because I refused to shoot a child that was put in that position, I would die. I would die, and I would not shoot a child. I wouldn't, no matter what.
To do what they do by their governments.
Look, I hear your concerns, and look,
I hear you too. Because if I'd lost a lot of family members to IDF bullets and bombs, I would probably feel the same way you do.
What I say is this: look, I don't agree with any form of the violence and death chants. I'm a doctor. I try and bring life to this world, right, to stay in life. I don't want anyone to die. But when you're an IDF soldier who is putting on dead women's lingerie in Palestine, tying children's teddy bears onto tanks, when you're leaving babies to rot in incubators, when you are laughing as you're blowing up schools and hospitals, there is going to be backlash. And what happens at these music festivals is they're reflective of how society feels, whether that's right or wrong. I'm not here to comment on that, but I'm just saying that, like, if the government was more proactive, people wouldn't feel this rage. And I don't want people to feel rage. I don't want death. Right, because I've had a lot of death in my family. I've had a lot of issues in my life because of this issue. I want there to be peace. I want both sides to come together. I don't want to see Jewish people suffering and dying, but I don't want to see Palestinians either suffering and dying. And all I want is, I want to bring in my hospital and I want to feed the children. And I've got the solutions here. I've got them here. I
hope people are watching this and listen to you.
I just need someone to listen.
Will you be going back to Gaza?
The only problem I see with that, I mean, the guy's intentions are probably completely pure, but if you're going to take a mobile hospital into a war zone, it's probably going to get blown up. I mean, the IDF has blown up Red Cross vans. They actually, when first responders would get to a scene to try to find bodies, the IDF was blowing up the first responders, which is a U.S. tactic. We did the same thing. We did what are called double taps in Iraq and places like that, where we would blow up a bunch of people, and then the paramedics would come to go through the bodies, and we'd blow them up. And then we did also what I call triple taps, is when those people were having funerals for their family, we would hit the funeral. That's the stuff the USA has done, and it's also the stuff that the IDF does. At a certain point, okay, for going into an area, you can't blame the soldiers. But the things that they do when they're shooting kids, when they're raping people, like, that's on them. That is the soldier. Then you can be mad at the soldier. And the soldiers, the IDF, has done these things, and like getting busted sexually assaulting a Palestinian prisoner, which is a common thing that happens there. They've even had dogs hump prisoners. So they're disgusting. That is on the soldier. That is not the government. Now, the government does allow it, making for that to be, an accepted thing. But at the end of the day, that soldier still has a choice, and they can say no to that, and they can refuse that and do the right thing. And if they don't, that's on them, not the government.
The war's still on?
I've my forms are submitted. I should be going back into Gaza. Whether I'm allowed back in or not, considering all the noise that I've made about the...
Well, you were on the Greta Thunberg flotilla, which I was very critical of her, because I'm not a big fan of hers. I thought it was all a bit of a virtue signalling load of old twaddle, if I'm honest. But I didn't know you, obviously. I found you a very impressive person to interview. But did that really achieve anything, or was it not just another of Greta's stunts, which really is about her, but doesn't really achieve anything?
So look, what I'll tell you to that right here is, I was invited to come down to, see the guys at the flotilla and have my voice there as a doctor that had been to Gaza. Like you, I'd watched Greta over the years. I wasn't sure either, But when I was there and I saw them get onto the boat, Greta was crying. Her mother was there, her family was there. There was real concern that she could be killed here. And there was concern by the other flotilla members. It was a very somber moment when they left, because family members were hugging, there was tears, and there was, because I was there before they got onto the boat, and there was all the precautionary stuff of people writing their last letters, their last messages. I mean, this is real. The flotilla before then, 3 weeks ago, had been bombed by drones. 15 years ago, 10 people on the flotilla were killed, right? You're talking about sailing in a ship, an unarmed ship carrying baby formula, to go into the heart of a genocide with an army that doesn't respect international law. I mean, to be fair to Greta, right, as much criticism as you can have, she's really brave for what she did. And I know people might have this in there, but it's real. They really wanted to break the siege, and they've made the whole world talk about this illegal siege, because the siege has been going on for 18 years in Gaza, and that has been locked by sea.
I just don't think anybody was thinking about it. It wasn't already, was my point.
And I can respect that. And I also just think, look, people have different ways of expressing their views. My ways of expressing it is to try and get something done. Other people is to perform protests like that gain media attention. Whatever it is, I just want the killing to stop. And I think everybody has a role to play. Even Greta has a role to play. And this is why I'm here, even you do as well, Piers. I know when I was a kid, because I used to watch, you on TV, and I know that you were the editor of the Daily Mirror at the time. You led the anti-war movement, or one of the main figures that led the anti-war movement. You came under a lot of stick. You were attacked a lot. And I remember as a kid looking up at you, looking up to you, and, as a Muslim, watching this white man, say that this is wrong, and you were challenging a media narrative. We didn't have social media back then. You didn't have the public support that you have now for the Palestine cause, and you were under a lot of attack, and your voice is so important because you were such a powerful voice in 2003 to stop the crime of the Iraq war, and that's why we need you on our side.
Well, listen,
to save these children.
I need no persuading about Gaza. I think this has gone on way too long. The death toll is way too high. The number of innocent people being killed on a daily basis is completely unacceptable. And I will be saying all this to the Israeli government minister in a moment. But Mohammed, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, real pleasure.
Keep up your
Thank you,
great
Piers.
work.
Thank you so much.
It's great. I like the fact you've come with plans to try and help.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Piers. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
I like that guy. It's nice to see, this message getting out there, because like I said before, the Palestinians have no voice. Like, their voices have been destroyed. Their journalists have been murdered, so that they have no voice. And so, because at the beginning we were seeing a lot more of what was going on than we do now, because they have no voice. They don't have a way to upload videos with their phones because they don't have internet or phone service and all this other stuff. So it's impossible to see the reality of what's really going on there. And so people like this that are bringing it to our attention and are covering it are heroes, absolute heroes. And I respect that guy, and I respect Piers for bringing him on and letting him talk.
Well, joining me now is May Golan, the Minister for Social Equality in Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Welcome to you, Ms. Golan. You were listening to that, but you were grimacing and pulling faces. What was your issue with what you heard?
Now, first of all, thank you for having me, Mr. Morgan. I was hearing parts because I was talking with my staff here, but for some of the things I heard, some were just absolute lies. The IDF is happy when he's bombing hospitals or schools, really? A country and a nation who suffered the Holocaust and lost 6 million people is happy about hunger.
I hate when they always bring that back up, the 6 million Jews and just victim. Okay. Yeah, that's a harsh thing, but that was like, we're not there anymore. Okay. We're not there anymore. Most of those people that are IDF soldiers had nothing to do with that. Probably don't know much about it, unless their schools are teaching them this victimhood from the very beginning. You can't draw that parallel, like anymore, because you're like drawing that parallel while you're doing the exact same thing that Germany did. You're ethnically cleansing a population of people. You are committing a genocide. So it's really rich that you sit there and compare it and say that this guy's lying about what's going on, that they're celebrating all that stuff. Well, there's videos of them celebrating. There's videos of them laughing, smoking cigarettes, putting on Palestinian women's clothes, tying children's teddy bears to their tanks as a trophy. Like, it's the same exact thing. So for you to sit there and play victim like that it's hypocritical.
And is trying to use that as a method. And also I was really trying so hard to listen to one word of him saying about the captives that we have, about the hostages that we have, the 50 hostages that weren't released. I didn't hear anything, not even a word. And I can understand the suffering. Of course I can. Trust me, Mr. Morgan, no one wants to see children died, children hurt. No one wants that, let alone the Israeli people who suffered what they did. But for them to say that we are doing it in order to hurt specifically innocent civilians is an absolute lie. I can tell you, and
but I hear this with respect, Minister. I hear this from a lot of
yes.
Israeli government members, ambassadors, lawyers, and so on. And my point is always the same: is that even if we accept that nobody in the IDF has ever deliberately targeted a child, which is contradicted by a lot of witnesses, but even if you accept that premise, you have to also agree that 20,000 children, maybe many more, that's just the ones that we believe is the number, have been killed as you've gone after Hamas. And it's a staggering number of children, innocent kids who've been killed here. And just on a human level, well, surely you must accept that this has now gone on long enough.
First of all, on a human level, I can tell you, not 100%, 1,000,000%, that we take no pleasure whatsoever not in seeing anyone innocent in Gaza who died, let alone our holy and hero soldiers and our innocent people. But let's put some things in perspective, and I would like to answer that, as much as I can, that would satisfy you, because hearing the interview before, it seems like you're coming from one side, and I can understand the amount of videos you
I'm
see.
not on anyone's side.
Okay.
And as you probably know, at the start of all this, for many months, I was the one being attacked by the pro-Palestinian guests who came on because they didn't like the fact that I was supporting Israel's right to defend itself, and in fact said it had a moral duty to defend itself.
It drives me nuts to see, like, when you're arguing about murdering children and the smugness these people get on their faces, like, why are you questioning me? Like, why? Yeah, like, you're just like, just it's disgusting. You sit there and look like you are disgusted that people are asking questions about the fact that you have murdered 20,000 kids at minimum. That's the confirmed number, 20,000. We know it's much higher because they haven't found them all. And in some cases, they're never going to be found because they're so, charred or crushed or destroyed that maybe they'll find remnants of some bones and stuff eventually. But until the cleanup happens, which isn't going to be happening by Palestinians, the United States has ordered, I can't remember how many bulldozers, but Caterpillar bulldozers to be delivered there in 2027 and 2028. So the U.S. is going to be helping with that cleaning. And Israel is probably going to be doing the majority of it, which means they're not going to care about the babies and bodies and stuff that are still there to find the bones and confirm the number killed. They're just going to bulldoze it and start building on it and just wipe it away like it never happened. That's what's going to happen. So we'll never know an accurate count of how many died because Israel will cover it up. And so will the United States. And it's disgusting.
So just because I'm now criticizing the Israeli government, let's not pretend that somehow I'm changing sides. I was never on anybody's side.
No.
I try and be an objective journalist.
When I heard that recorded just now, that interview, you said to him specifically, no one needs to persuade me about Gaza. So
right.
I think that when you see, okay, Mr. Morgan, let me answer. When you see videos and when you see pictures, which I'm sure you get a mass of them, okay, you have to remember those videos and pictures don't come from the moon. Right? They're coming from people who take videos there. Everyone has mobile phones, smartphones. So obviously, some of those videos could be reflected to one side. I really do suggest, you see some of the videos of the horrors that happened on October 7th.
I saw them.
Of the horrors that have been happening. 1 second.
Well, I saw them.
You saw the 40-minute video? You saw the 40-minute video of the horrors? Well, if you saw that, if you did saw that, and let me just tell you that it's just a part. It's just a part.
Yes, I know.
What we could have shown, because
you saw our 40-minute video of Hamas attacking, the 1,400 or however many people was. Now they hid the video of them shooting the civilians themselves with the Apache helicopters. Fortunately, somebody leaked it to, I don't know if it was Haaretz or where it was initially leaked, but it was leaked. So we do have it and we do see it. And you're sitting here like saying that was atrocious, which it was, but it was your own soldiers committing most of the atrocity. The most of the deaths that came that day came from the IDF, not Hamas. Not Hamas. So even that itself is not true. So this makes this 100% propaganda because obviously she knows what her own government did. Obviously. She's probably seen all the videos too. She probably had to try to stop that video from getting out because that's what she is. She's the propagandist for Israel. That's what she is. So she has to make sure that Israel's reputation is pristine and perfect. So she's going to ignore all that stuff.
Majority was horrible. If you saw that, you can't stay calm in yourself and relaxed about what Israel and the Jewish nation have to endure for the last 75 years. We have women that are being slaughtered and raped in the most brutal way. I'm, as the Minister for Social Equality and the Advancement of Women, I just heard the person that you interviewed mocking about it and laughing about it.
What he was laughing about.
No, hang on. He was laughing and mocking. You asked him, you must have mischaracterized.
You must have mischaracterized it.
Okay.
The point he was making, and he's an extremely courageous doctor who risked his own life several times now to go and work in hospitals in Gaza as the bombs are dropping. So I won't have you attacking him.
Yeah, I wish he would have told
level.
you that Israel has suggested more than 100 incubators to the Shifa hospitals and to the authorities of Hamas, and they refused it. I wish he would have told you that many hospitals, Mr. Morgan, 1 second. I wish he would have told you that many hospitals underground have facilities of terror. I wish he would have told you that schools and places of humanitarian aid, which, by the way, the country that have massacred in her holiday, has been given over 70,000 aid trucks. Do you hear that?
Yeah,
70,000 aid trucks. He's talking about a hospital.
Let me respond.
What country does that? A country that has a woman being chopped off into pieces and babies being chopped off into pieces, men beheaded, elderly people are being kidnapped. Do you know what we had to watch?
Yes,
He's talking about what the Gazans are being through, but what about the Jewish nation that have buses been blowing up for the last 70 years?
Yes. Okay. Let me respond. As I said to you, for a long time in this war, I defended Israel's right to defend itself. But that right to self-defense has now been consumed by senior members of your government, your colleagues, Smodrich, Ben-Gvir and others, extreme right-wing members of that government who are now talking in a very brazen and very open way about what they really want to happen, which is, in their words, cleansing Gaza of all Palestinians. That is ethnic cleansing. That is a war crime. So you may not say that, or maybe you will, but your colleagues are saying that, and they want to cleanse Gaza, as they put it, of all Palestinians. That is not self-defense. That is ethnic cleansing. So you can play the moral argument against me about October the 7th, but it's pointless.
I don't need to play the moral argument.
Well, let me explain.
Let
me explain. I have said repeatedly, if I may finish my sentence, I have for 20 months.
I hear you in delay. Don't
Can
get
I finish
angry, Mr.
my
Morgan.
sentence?
I hear you on delay.
Okay.
But don't get angry. I hear you on delay.
You're the one getting angry. I'm trying to get a word in.
I'm not.
Right, let me finish my sentence, if I may. For 20 months, as anyone who's watched my show will tell you, and I would suspect you haven't watched it much, or you wouldn't be questioning what I feel about October the 7th. To me, it was one of the most heinous terror attacks of modern times, an absolutely despicable assault on predominantly innocent women, children, grandmothers, grandfathers, in the most repulsive, horrific, atrocious manner. And Hamas, to me, are a disgusting terrorist.
I look forward to the day that Pierce realizes that most of those deaths came from IDF. I yearn for that day that he realizes that and changes this story.
Organization who lost any right to govern for another second in Gaza the moment they perpetrated that act of pure evil. However, and it's an important however, what the Israeli government has been doing in the last few months in Gaza has now, to even its closest allies, become something they cannot defend. And you know this. When you do a 3-month blockade of food, you all boast about how much aid you're giving them. You blocked most aid and food for 3 months to an already starving, impoverished
Listen,
people
Mr. Morgan, you're
who
saying
have
a lot
been
of
rained
stuff,
with
and I need to
bombs
remember to
now for
comment
20
about all of
months.
them.
That is actually not a right thing to do.
That's
right?
a complete lie.
It's not a lie.
It's a lie.
It's not a lie. The blockade is not a lie.
And if you let me comment, you say so much accusations. You have to let me comment about some of them.
So there was no
First of all,
blockade.
let's start with the Smotrich. Okay, wait. You said a lot of things. I want to comment about all of them. If you let me, I would be more than happy.
Okay.
First of all, let's start about Smotrich and Ben Gvir, what you said. Now, Mr. Morgan, I don't need to explain to you, who I have been watching his show and for many, and been watching your professional career for many years, by the way, and do have evaluation for everything that you say and for what you believe in, which I really think you are being misled. That is why I came here on this show, not because I think anything else. Now, I would be really happy if you let me finish some of the points I want to tell you. First of all, regarding Smotrich and Ben Gvir, you have to know, with all of your profession, that there is two kinds of politicians. One, like you interviewed, for instance, Naftali Bennett, an interview I did watch, who by accident forgot to mention that he launched a party just a month ago, and forgot to tell you that he signed so many declarations before he became a prime minister and didn't held up to any of them, and he forgot to tell you a lot of things, but in actual fact deceived his own people. And just like the rest of them that you interviewed, Olmert and Barak and all those prime ministers, the one thing in common that they all have is the fact that the public doesn't vote for them anymore, so they're very bitter. Now, regarding Smotrich and Ben Gvir, you have to remember, when you say Smotrich and Ben Gvir, you're talking about, and I don't know what they said, but I'm referring to what you said. I'm, trusting your words. You're talking obviously about the Trump's plan. Now, this is not Smotrich or Ben Gvir's plan.
No, I'm not talking about Trump's plan.
Okay, so I don't know. I don't know
about
anything
what came out of their
regarding to them
mouths.
wanting. They want to kill.
They want to
Palestinians
cleanse.
in Gaza?
Their words: cleanse Gaza of all the Palestinians.
So when you say cleanse, I can tell you that they refer to the Trump's plan. And when we're talking about Trump's plan, I have to tell you that, first of all, Donald J. Trump, which is what I consider the best thing that God could have given us for a new middle age, his collaboration with Prime Minister Netanyahu is really what we could all wish for in order to make a new Middle East. But I can tell you that we are not taking anything off the table in order to just protect our civilians and our children of Israel. And if we have to look at Trump's plan, which for me, as I think, is thinking outside of the box, and if we have to consider other things, like we have examined over the decades, we will. But I don't see it as ethnic cleansing, let alone.
So would you like? Let me ask you then. Let me ask you. Would you like to cleanse Gaza of all the Palestinians?
Listen, I don't use the terminology of you and your colleagues. That is not my terminology.
Well, that's the terminology of your colleague.
Is not my terminology. Just like the settlements that you mentioned with the
it's
person
the terminology. To be clear, it's the terminology of your own cabinet colleague. It's Smodrich, your finance minister. It's your colleague, not mine or my colleagues. It's the language used by your finance minister only 2 weeks ago.
I can tell you that for the first time ever, we have a very right-wing government, as you can see. Our views are very transparent, and everything that is held in the cabinet and not in the cabinet, but in the government is being shared outside. No one is hiding anything. Now, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are not a part of my party, but they are a part of this government. And I'm telling you, and although I'm not representing them, that they are talking about the Trump's plan, and we are considering it just like we consider any other plan in order to protect our civilians. Now, I want to say another thing about that. Listen, I don't know. I heard your interviews, and I know you talk about Smotrich and his things that he said, but I want to say something about Bezalel Smotrich, although I have nothing to do with his party. Yes, he's a part of my government, not from my party. I don't know that, but Smotrich went to more funerals this year than you went in your entire life, okay? His entire family.
How do you know that?
Wait one second. Wait one second.
You have no idea how many funerals I've been to.
And
how do you
his
know
entire
that?
friends, because I tell you, he went to hundreds and hundreds of funerals from his own community. His heart was broken. We are wounded. Our ministers are wounded from the sights we saw. I wanted to tell you before, and you stopped me. As the Minister for Social Equality and the Advancement of Women, what I saw that women have endured, your eyes and your mind could never comprehend. The fact is that we have children in Gaza today that the interview before was talking about that are being raised on Mein Kampf. They are being raised of killing Jews from the second they are born. This is what they say. And you know what? If you don't believe me, you can talk with the hostages that came back from captivity. And
being raised on Mein Kampf. Being raised on Mein Kampf. That's been debunked. That's been totally debunked. I've actually seen videos of Israeli kids being taught to hate Arabs and want them dead. So usually when Israel says something is being done, it's basically they're doing it. They're just trying to push it onto Hamas and Palestinians. You know, like the putting a bomb inside of a body thing never happened in Israel, but Palestinians sending bodies to Israel. But Israel did indeed put a bomb in a Palestinian martyr, and they sent the body back. And while they were carrying the body down the street to the funeral, they blew it up and killed a bunch of people. Israel did that. Not Palestine, not Hamas. So usually if they're saying these atrocities are happening, it's what they're doing.
So what would you do with them? What would you do with them, the Palestinians?
With who?
The Palestinians. What would you do with them?
Well, first of all, this is not an issue now with the Palestinians. This is not an issue with the terror regime of Hamas. In my idea,
but I'm asking you what you would do with the Palestinian population. What would you do with it?
I don't know. Would you like to accept them or we eliminate the terror of Hamas? Would England accept them?
Well, let me read you.
Maybe another Arab country?
Let me remind you of some of the things that you've said yourself. Yeah. All right, during an October 24 rally. In support of Jewish settlements in Gaza, you said there should be another Nakba, referring to the 1948 Palestinian displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. You also said, I am personally proud of the ruins of Gaza and that every baby, even 80 years from now, will tell their grandchildren what the Jews did. That was in February, you said this. You want explicit violence against Hamas and Palestinians. In February 2024...
Against Hamas, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We
Okay.
want to eliminate every terrorist of Hamas. Let me tell you that.
Hang on, I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished. Sorry, I haven't finished.
When we say, Mr.
I haven't
Morgan,
finished yet.
Oh, you
In
haven't
December
finished.
2023,
Please.
you said, I don't care about Gaza. I literally don't care at all. I mean, and I could go on
So I
reading
wanna
you stuff
tell you-
you've had. So my point is, you say that
Okay.
Smodrich and Ben-Gvir, they're the right-wingers. You're sounding pretty right-wing yourself.
I'm a
I mean,
right-winger as well. I'm a right-winger as well.
Right.
Absolutely.
Would you say you're an
Absolutely.
extremist?
That doesn't mean I take any pleasure of an innocent Arab man or woman or child in Gaza suffering. But the fact is that you all, for some reason, refuse to acknowledge is that Hamas is using them as human shields all the time.
I've never
now,
denied
you tell
that.
Me,
I've
you
never
tell me.
denied
I want to
that.
ask you, Mr. Morgan. You think?
I know what Hamas do.
I wanted to ask you something. You care very much about the Gazans, right? I want to ask you something. You know,
I care about
when we
Israelis
had
too.
the horrifying Holocaust. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. When we had the horrifying Holocaust, do you know that we had such a thing called the righteous among the nations? Those were Christian people who risked their own lives in order to save Jews. Now, I'm asking you, Mr. Morgan, I'm still waiting for one Gazan person, one out of 2 million, to come out and say, this is where the hostages are. This is where they hide. Or one of them to come and say, this is where the terrorism are. This is where they hide all of their weapons and their rockets and all of the horrible tunnels where they abuse our hostages. Not even one. Now, even though I said that, I can tell you that right now, the IDF, which I tell you, you cannot agree, that's okay, but I tell you, IDF is the most moral army in the world. I repeat, is the most moral army in the world.
Well, that brings
is
me...
not shooting.
Okay.
Is not, one second, one more sentence, Mr. Morgan, please.
Okay.
Is not shooting at population, is not shooting an innocent population. But you tell me, what do we need to do when Hamas terrorists are hiding behind human people, are hiding behind schools,
You know the first thing you could do?
underground of hospitals? What do we need to do?
You know the first thing you could do? You could lift the ban that
Yes.
the Israeli government has put on international journalists going into Gaza so that all the claims that you make, which always blame Hamas for absolutely everything, could be verified by independent journalists. Why don't you do that? Why for 20 months have you banned international media from going into Gaza? An unprecedented ban for any modern warfare. Why have you done this?
And on top of it, they've murdered all the Gazan and Palestinian journalists that were there. Not all, but 300 of them, roughly. So they don't want the information getting out because they know what they're doing is absolutely horrific. Otherwise, they would have let those journalists just keep doing their jobs. And understand, these are people that are dressed in blue press helmets, press jackets, and everything. And they knowingly assassinated them, sniped them, so that they could not get information out about what's going on. They do not want media coverage in there for that specific reason, because they don't want the world to know that they are committing a genocide or a Holocaust, as some would call it.
Well, I want to tell you that, first of all, you have to understand something. The IDF army is not trained to shoot in bursts. They are trained to shoot through sights in a single shot mode. That means they are not shooting like in the movies, like you think, spraying all over.
What's that got to do with the media being banned?
I will tell you right now. So if you'll just let me finish. So you would agree with me that if the IDF would have shot in bursts, Gaza would have been a parking lot within 12 hours. And that would have
Gaza
been
is a
much more
parking
dangerous
lot.
to the No, it's not.
You've
No,
destroyed
it's not, because there are
70% of
corridors for
Gaza already,
humanitarian-
and
there
you're
are
carrying on
humanitarian
destroying the
corridors
rest.
for the Gazans to
Gaza
stay
is
in.
a parking
There are
lot. With all due
humanitarian-
respect, Minister, you have reduced
Mr. Morgan.
2/3 of Gaza to a parking lot. Why are you pretending
Mr.
otherwise?
Morgan. No, I'm not pretending. I don't
think
need to
that's
pretend.
funny?
I'm saying the reality like it is. No,
You think that's funny?
Of course, it's funny. It's funny when you think that I'm pretending. I'm sitting here in front of you. I don't have to, right? I can live my life and don't conduct with you. But I am sitting here because I know I'm telling the truth. I have no reason to lie. Now, regarding to the journalists, the IDF has declared the Gaza Strip as a very dangerous combat zone, and there is a risk not just for the journalists to be harmed by the terrorists or by the IDF trying to eliminate the terrorists that are hiding behind civilians, but also there is a risk for journalists to be kidnapped. But I have to ask, Mr. Morgan.
See, and she admitted something there. She admitted something there that the Israelis don't just fire willy-nilly into Gaza. They don't just like spray machine gun fire everywhere. They use their scopes, and they are very, very what's the word I'm looking for? Precise with who they're targeting, right? Which means that when they shoot a baby in the head, they are looking down the scope at a baby. When they shoot a journalist, they are looking down the scope at the journalist. So she's admitting they know exactly who they're shooting and what they're shooting, because they're not just spraying bullets. They are taking aim, looking down their scopes, looking down their scopes, and shooting. So that's an admittance that they obviously know if that's the case, if they don't just spray, then that means they know exactly who they're killing. And when you hear witnesses of doctors that have been there, volunteers that have come out that have said they had babies with bullet holes in the head, like the guy admitted it earlier in the interview, in the head, that was intentional. Absolutely intentional.
You are so worried about journalists that will eventually go into Gaza. Don't worry about that. But what about worrying a little bit that maybe the Red Cross would go in to visit our hostages that are drinking sewage water, that are sitting in cages of 1 meter, that are being abused,
to be clear,
raped,
again,
beaten up, that haven't been eaten, that no one knows what is going on with them. Not like the Red Cross that is coming into our prisons and visiting murderers, Arab murderers. They are visiting them.
If I may respond, I agree.
Yes.
The hostages should be released. It is disgusting they were taken in the first place. It remains disgusting. It is horrific that Hamas holds the families of these hostages through this unbelievably unbearable 20 months of hell. I hope that clarifies my position on hostages. But you talk about the IDF being the most moral army in the world. On Friday, the Israeli publication Haaretz published a story claiming the IDF are deliberately firing at Palestinians at aid distribution centers. Soldiers from the IDF told the publication that commanders ordered troops to shoot at crowds to drive them away or disperse them, even though it was clear they posed no threat. More than 400, maybe 500 people have been killed apparently in this manner. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, immediately said all of this was malicious falsehood designed to defame the military. And the Israeli military has launched an investigation into possible war crimes following the report. But you see, this is the problem, and this is why the fact there's no media there is so important. It's not down to the IDF to decide whether journalists are at risk. It's down to the journalists and their organizations. And if the journalists were there, they could verify exactly who is shooting who in the food lines. Because you just say, as you always do, everything is being done, every bad act in Gaza is being done by Hamas. And everybody else says, no, actually, the IDF are doing a lot of bad things too. But the only way to really get to the bottom of this is let the journalists
Who's everybody else?
Pretty much everybody else. Pretty much everybody.
Everybody else.
The only journalists allowed to operate, of whom you've killed nearly 200, the Palestinian journalists, they, of course, are the only journalists that can actually get any reports out, because they're the only ones allowed in, because they're already there. You have the United Nations. You have allies like the UK, like France. You've got America now, who wants to bring this to an end. Pretty much everybody around you. And here's the irony for this. When Israel attacked Iran, I thought that was a justified thing to do, to neutralize Iran's nuclear capability. I was glad that Israel finally did that action. I was glad that Donald Trump joined in and specifically targeted the nuclear capacity that Iran has. I think it would have been a disaster for the world if they were allowed to develop.
Don't agree. I don't agree with him there. It wouldn't have been a disaster to the world. They have every right they have the right to defend themselves, right? Israel has a right to defend themselves. Iran has a right to defend themselves because they have a country with nuclear weapons right next door that wants to kill them. And you have the United States that's also threatened them. So they have every right to defend themselves and every right to nuke just as much as Israel does. And I hate when these people throw out this fucking narrative that Iran with a nuke would be a threat. Yes, they might be a threat to Israel, but Israel deserves that threat for what they have done and what they are doing. They deserve it. And if they're going to sit there and say that they have the right to defend themselves, So does every other country in that area from Israel, to defend themselves from Israel, because Israel has been the aggressor every single time. Every time. So I hate this narrative. I hate when they say this, that Iran can't get a nuke. They can't get a nuke because they chant death to America. Yeah, quit fucking with them. Quit fucking with them. Leave them alone. If everybody left these other countries alone, they would leave the rest of the world alone. But you provoke them. You constantly provoke them. You stick your tentacles into their affairs and into their country and running it the way that they want to. If you just left people alone and let these countries have their sovereignty and let them elect their own leaders and not overthrow their governments and not assassinate their generals and do things like that, they'd want nothing to do with us. All these countries have all their own things going on, their own citizens to take care of, their own problems to take care of. And then they have to sit there and worry about these other countries that have nukes that are threatening them all the time. It drives me insane when they use this narrative.
Nuclear weapons. But the way you went about taking on Iran, the way you went about taking on Hezbollah, there's no relation to what you've done in Gaza. You're just obliterating Gaza. And you don't really care how many civilians are dying in the process. You say you do, but you don't really.
That is a lie. You can stop saying that. Just the fact that you listen, Mr. Morgan, because if you repeat something again and again and again, it won't make it true. That we don't want to kill innocent civilians in Gaza, period. But I'm telling you again and again that once they hide under human population and we have to eliminate terrorists, we have to do what we have to do. And I don't remember you asking the allies that you were talking about in World War II if they were hiding about how many children died when we eliminated the Nazis. I don't remember that. You know what? I don't remember in any mid-war where you count numbers, but you obviously emphasize on on what's going on in Gaza. Now, the difference, the difference between Gaza and Iran and Hezbollah. Wait, you asked such a long question. You can't let me answer in 1 minute.
How many Hamas have been killed?
The difference, I will answer. Let me finish. The difference between Iran and Hezbollah is the fact is that Gaza is the most crowded population that we need to deal with, and 2 million people in the Gaza Strip that are so crowded, and the terrorists are hiding in between. I can tell you, Mr. Morgan,
how many Hamas have been killed?
I don't think we will eliminate every Hamas person because we didn't eliminate every Nazi person.
But how many Hamas have you killed?
I'm not going to go into specifics with you. I'm going to tell you as a government member. I'm not going to. We'll end this war. And you'll know everything. You'll be able to go in. You'll be able to hear all the numbers.
If you don't know how many you've killed, how do you know how many are left to be killed?
Because I can first of all, I know, and I'm choosing as a government member to not tell you that because I know that once you get some knowledge.
Because she doesn't know. She's refusing to answer because they don't care. She's refusing to answer because that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many Hamas are there that have been killed. Doesn't matter how many are left because that's not the point. The point of this is not to eradicate Hamas. It's to eradicate Palestinians so that they can take over that land. They want that land and they will do whatever they have to get it. And then the Trump administration, or not the Trump administration, but the Trump family is going to come in and profit off of that. And that has been a 2-year master plan. Steve Witkoff called it the master plan. And they had that 2 years prior to October 7th. So this isn't about destroying Hamas. They don't give a shit. I bet they don't know. I bet they have no idea how many Hamas are dead or left, which shows they don't give a shit. Because why wouldn't they want to say, like if she has the numbers, six Hamas soldiers have been killed, this tells you everything you need to know. They don't care.
You turn it. Of course I do. I'm a government member, but I can tell you. What do you mean? How many terrorists we killed?
Yes.
I can tell you that we have more. We have many more.
Well, how many?
This is what.
How many?
The reason. I will not tell you.
You know, but you won't tell me.
But the reason.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
How many civilians have you killed?
The reason
How many
that
civilians
we
have you
are
killed?
trying to eliminate is that you can ask it again. I will not answer.
How many civilians have you killed? Do you
By
know?
the way,
Do you know how many civilians you've killed?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. The
So you
civilians,
do
I
know
don't
how many terrorists
I
you've
don't know.
killed? You've no idea how many civilians
because
you've
we
killed.
have the difference is that we have a list of terrorists that we want to eliminate. We don't aim to kill innocent people in order. We don't have a list of them.
Okay.
But I can tell you, I can assure you that the IDF is trying to avoid as many innocent casualties as possible.
Minister,
and therefore,
you know what, Minister? It's not doing a very good job of avoiding killing innocent people.
That is rude of you to not let me finish, Mr. Morgan.
Yeah.
Let me finish one sentence. I can tell you that the IDF, every time it needs to eliminate a terrorist, it tells the population to go to this humanitarian corridor or to this humanitarian corridor. They alert them in advance, unlike the terrorists who shoot at us and shoot at an innocent population, murder children and women and elderly and men and everything in their power they can. By the way, they eliminate many foreigners, dozens of foreign nationalities on October 7th. What on earth did they do to them? So eventually, I just want to tell you that the IDF has no willing whatsoever to shoot at an innocent population when they want, in actual fact, to save the Gazans from the real occupations of the Hamas terrorism who abuses them. And I wonder if you...
So she's saying all this like, the most moral army in the world, but it still doesn't answer the question. Then why is IDF shooting babies in the head? That should be the number one question. Like, if Pierce knows that, why didn't he ask her that question? So why have babies been shot in the head? If they're so moral and they're so calculated because they're looking down their scopes, they're not just spray firing in there. If that's the case, then why are babies showing up shot in the chest and the head? I would have fixated on that question this entire interview if I were Pierce until she answered it. So, I mean, good job, Pierce. But like, I would have, maybe he's trying to be a little bit, like not so hard so that they'll come back and he can talk to more of these people. I don't know. But I would have pressed her so hard on those questions.
You see those videos that the Hamas people are, that the Gazans are freeing in the WhatsApp and in the social medias when they're saying Hamas won't let us out. Hamas won't let us take the humanitarian aid. Hamas is killing us if we're just daring to talk. And if you think that Hamas...
Well, and actually, it has been found that the people that were stealing the aid and stopping the aid were ISIS, and sometimes Israelis. There's videos of Israelis taking the trucks that have aid and kicking it off and smashing it and everything. But there's also the ISIS members that Israel has hired that were going in and doing the same thing, and they were blaming it on Hamas. And that's like, my whole thing is, I think that that's probably what happened on October 7th. I think these were the ISIS members that they had hired and not Hamas that they allowed to come in and do what they did so that they could justify what they're doing now. I don't think it was actually Hamas. That's just my personal thing. And also there's the fact that Israel created and funded Hamas. They literally created them and funded them. And maybe it blew up in their face, but they were to the tune of like 1.2, 1.9, like some over $1 billion went to Hamas. So you don't think they would do special favors for Israel, for getting that money? And if weapons and everything aren't allowed into Gaza, where did they get their weapons? Obviously, they were distributed to them by Israel. Because nothing gets inside there without Israel's knowledge. Nothing. Absolutely nothing gets in there or goes out. So they know exactly what they were given. They know exactly what they have. So it's all like, it's crazy to me how much propaganda comes out of Israel. I would say Israel is probably second to propaganda as to the United States. The CIA, Mossad, like all this propaganda. These two countries are the biggest proponents of propaganda.
is a legitimate ruling, then I don't know what to say. But if you don't, and I think you don't, then you should be thanking us, like the rest of the world, for freeing the Gazans from the Hamas ruling, which is a Nazi terror of our days.
I started this interview by saying Hamas should not obviously be in charge anymore, but I also think the IDF should stop what they're doing in Gaza now, because too many innocent people are being killed. And I'm afraid I don't believe what the IDF or the Israeli government is now saying about what's happening in Gaza, because you won't let the media in to verify it. And in my experience, there's a long history of being a journalist. When people stop journalists going into an area like Gaza during a war, it's because they don't want people to see what they're doing there. They've got something to hide. Anyway, I've got to leave it there.
That's correct.
May Golan, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it. Well, let me turn to my panel now, who've been waiting very patiently throughout all this. Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of the British Army in Afghanistan, trustee of the UK Friends of the Association for the Wellbeing of Israel Soldiers. Wajahat Ali, the host of the Democracy-ish podcast, and the pro-Israeli activist with PragerU, Shabbos Kestenbaum. Well, welcome to all of you. Sorry for keeping you waiting there. Let me start with you, Wajahat. I mean, you were listening there to that interview with the Israeli government minister. Your thoughts?
I don't have to say anything after you did a masterful job of interviewing her and the world listening to her unhinged lunacy and genocidal comments. I mean, I rest my case, Piers. That is the Minister of Social Equality in Israel. With ministers of social equality, who needs ministers of genocide? I mean, that woman was completely racist and unhinged. And speaking about, you know, the quotes of her colleagues, the Israeli leaders right now, I brought some receipts for you, Piers. This is what Smotrich has actually said, the finance minister of Israel, quote, "We are conquering, cleansing, and remaining in Gaza until Hamas is destroyed," end quote. Another quote by Smotrich, "We are finally going to occupy the Gaza Strip. We will stop being afraid of the word occupation." Another quote from Smotrich, "Within a few months, Gaza will be totally destroyed. The Gazan citizens will be concentrated in the south. They will be totally despairing, understanding that there's no hope and nothing to look for in Gaza." This is what the president of Israel said. There are no innocent civilians in Gaza. This is what the deputy speaker of Israel's parliament said. Israel has, quote, "one common goal, erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth." For the past year and a half, Piers, I've been on your show. And in the past year and a half, you've asked me, do I condemn the violence done by Hamas? What did I say, Piers? Yes, I do, because I'm against violent extremism, whether it's a terrorist group or whether it's state-sanctioned terrorism. But what we've seen in the past year and a half, especially that report 3 days ago, is the IDF has been commanded to shoot at unarmed civilians, Palestinians, who are at a food distribution site. Piers, any person with any morality, any decency, who believes in God like I do, how can they support the IDF shooting Palestinian civilians who are trying to get humanitarian aid? You know how many Palestinians have been killed in the quote-unquote killing field? That's an IDF soldier's word, not mine. 570 Palestinians unarmed trying to get food. Why is that food there through humanitarian aid? Because Israel, like you mentioned, has done a blockade because Israel occupies Gaza. The occupation is immoral. The settlements are immoral. We haven't even talked about the West Bank, Piers. I know you've been there. I've been there. The terrorism that has been unleashed against
I think the expansion of settlements on the West Bank is absolutely appalling.
It's disgusting.
And it's
enough
illegal.
Is enough.
It's illegal and it shouldn't be happening. Colonel Kemp, let me bring you in here. You've just been over there. You're very supportive of Israel's government and the IDF and what they're doing. But surely with all your military experience, even you must be looking at what's happening now in Gaza and thinking this has got to come to an end.
I think everyone's thinking it's got to come to an end. Certainly the Israelis are thinking it's got to come to an end. They've been fighting a vicious, brutal terrorist organization for 20 months that is embedded completely in the civilian population. They've been doing their very best, and I've witnessed it myself inside Gaza with the IDF. They've been doing their very best to minimize the deaths of innocent civilians. And I think they've succeeded to a large extent in that. I don't know what the latest figure is from Hamas, but it's something around 50, 60,000 or thereabouts. That's their estimate. And of course, we can't rely on that in any way, but we've got nothing else to go on. The IDF don't issue estimates of their civilians that they think they might have killed. But they have issued estimates of the number of Hamas terrorists that they think they've killed, obviously not exact. And it's something around about 25 to 30,000.
Why don't they count the civilians?
How do you do that? I mean,
how do they count the terrorists?
Because they're targeting the terrorists. They know who they're targeting, and they know when they believe they've killed them. You can't count every single person coming under attack. And the reality is that if those figures are correct, and let's assume for a moment they are, particularly I don't trust the Hamas figures, but let's assume they're correct, that means that it's approximately one civilian killed for every combatant killed inside Gaza in the last 20 months, which is terrible. It's a really terrible statistic. But if you compare it to Afghanistan, the Americans and their allies estimate they killed about 5 civilians for every combatant in Afghanistan and 3 in Iraq. And the United Nations estimate that in urban combat since the Second World War, about 9 civilians have died for every combatant. So it shows, this is not easy. Hamas is doing their level best to make Israel kill as many of their own civilians as possible to achieve exactly what they have achieved, which is a vilification.
But Israel, see, my argument would be back to you, Colonel Cummings. Israel is not achieving its goals. It's not got rid of Hamas, that's clear. It's not got the hostages released. In fact, they've only been released during diplomatic phases of this 20-month war. They're now talking openly through people like Smotrich, the finance minister, of ethnically cleansing the entire Gaza Strip of all Palestinians, which is a war crime if they try and do that. They try and kick them all out. So none of the goals which they set out to achieve have been achieved and don't look like anything near being achieved. And at the same time, you've got 70% of Gaza has been destroyed. You've got this moving population being moved around, and wherever they move to, they then get bombed again. You've got thousands of them queuing up desperately for food, despite Israelis claiming no one there is hungry. Well, what are they stampeding each other for? To get fragments of food, if that's not the case. And then you've got this Haaretz report, which of course Netanyahu has emphatically denied. And the Haaretz report coming from IDF soldiers they source, saying that a lot of the people dying in these shooting incidents in the food lines are being shot dead by Israelis. So you're pulling people, if this is true, and it's an Israeli publication, if this is true, well, you can laugh, Colonel Kemp, but why would you laugh?
I laugh because it's fiction.
Field. That was a quote. It's a killing field.
The Haaretz report, as far as I can see, deliberately distorted what they were told. In the Hebrew version, the soldiers apparently said, we were told to shoot in the direction of Hamas, of civilians who were rioting.
No, that's not true. No, I've read that. I've read that. It's simply not true. That's a conspiracy theory, honestly. It is a conspiracy theory because they talked about the killing fields. They talked about lots of people dying, 570 people dying.
I read the article and I don't believe it's true. I've been, as I said before, I've been inside Gaza with the IDF before. I've seen the extraordinary measures they take to minimise the.
Even the report you gave, Colonel Kemp, even the report you did had gunfire in the background at the end. Let's take a look.
Many of the people behind me here have told me it's the first time they've ever received free aid. So don't believe the propaganda that's been churned out by Hamas and amplified by too much of the international and national media.
I mean, it was almost like a comedy sketch if it wasn't so serious. There you are saying, don't believe any of the stories of the Israelis shooting at people here, and next thing you hear is a machine gun going off.
Yeah, you may find machine guns funny, but
I don't.
Those of us who have
I don't find it funny, but it flew in the face of what you literally were saying on camera.
You said it was a comedy sketch. That machine gun.
I said it would be funny if it had been a comedy sketch, but it was actually serious.
I was in that base, in that aid distribution site for around about 2 to 3 hours. In that time, I heard a huge number of explosions, gunfire, etc., because this is in a war zone. And you get machine gun fire and you get explosions in a war zone. That machine gun fire, if you looked at that video clip carefully, you would see that not one single Gazan flinched when that fire was heard because it was nowhere near the aid distribution site. It was distant fire, constantly going on. But you can try and turn that into the idea that it's the IDF, as many people have on social media, tried to say this was the IDF shooting civilians. Why would the IDF want to shoot at civilians at a humanitarian aid site that they support, that they help to set up, and that they want to work? They wouldn't. It would make no sense whatsoever. The people that are doing the shooting are Hamas. I spoke to many Gazan civilians, at least 50 in that.
Why don't the journalists get in then? Let the journalists in, and that can be verified.
They have told me. Why don't I let the journalists? It's got nothing to do with me.
Why doesn't Israel let the journalists in then?
This is shameful. This is shameful.
You'll have to ask Israel that.
We all know why they're not letting them in, Colonel Kemp. It's because they don't want the world to see what's happening. Let me bring in Shabbos, who's been waiting patiently. Shabbos.
The first reason, you've asked me a question, let me answer it. The first reason is because there's a very big danger if journalists went in on their own of getting kidnapped. You say...
That's the risk that they should be prepared to take themselves.
And Israel has killed journalists.
You say that, but then Western journalists kidnapped inside Gaza become
how convenient. So that's why you have a 20-month media ban. Come on.
And the second reason, I don't know this for sure, I'm surmising, but the second reason, if I was in that position, I would be very hesitant to let journalists in, because I've seen how many journalists distort what they see from the West, from Britain, from the United States.
Of course. Well, how convenient. How convenient.
Don't
let the journalists in. Only let the IDF tell the story. How very convenient. Let me bring in Shabbos. We've been waiting very patiently. We haven't got as long as we would normally have because we ran over with the minister. But Shabbos, I mean, your response to this?
I would start by saying this. Piers, you know how many Jews are living in Gaza? It's zero. You know how many Jews are living in Ramallah? It's zero. You know how many Jews are living in Nablus? It's zero. You know how many Jews are living in Jenin? It's zero. After Egypt and half a dozen other Arab Muslim countries attacked Israel in 1967, Israel was able to conquer an area called the Sinai Peninsula that is 2 times as large as Israel. And in 1979, they gave it back to Egypt unilaterally and unconditionally. In 2005, Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip. They expelled every last living and dead Jew from Gaza, all in the name of peace. The argument that Israel is experiencing or is trying to have an expansionist greater state of Israel is not corroborated by the facts or reality. And all I can say is thank God that there was no Piers Morgan Uncensored during World War II, because what you would do during the bombing of Dresden, during the Battle of Berlin, is you would have German commentators talking about the civilian death toll and how terrible it is that the Allies...
Why was the Geneva Convention set up?
The Geneva Convention was set up specifically in order to deride the world of having Nazism and fascism in the future.
Actually, it was designed specifically to avoid some of the things that we saw in World War II. That was why it was set up.
Correct. And the Geneva Convention made it clear that, unfortunately, war in the 20th and 21st century is a necessary evil. It is terrible to have civilians being killed. It is terrible when you have a civilian death toll. But unfortunately, that is a consequence of every war ever fought in modern warfare. I mean, do you know how many German civilians were killed during World War II? It was 2 to 3 million. You know how many Austro-Hungarians were killed during World War I? It was anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million. But if we judge the
We're not in a world war. We're in a war between the most powerful military in the Middle East and a 2 million strong, with half of those being under 18, population of the Gaza Strip, which has been under occupation now for decades. That's what we're talking about. It's not a world war. We're not talking about a world war. We're talking about the most sophisticated military in the Middle East, relentlessly bombarding for 20 months a small area of land, the Gaza Strip, with 1 million people under 18. That's what we're talking about. Now, I agree Hamas had to be got rid of, but it hasn't happened. And at some point, there has to be an acknowledgement that this mission has failed. And all that's happened is Gaza has been flattened. More and more innocent people are being killed. None of the mission goals are being achieved. And now we've got members of the government openly saying, actually, what we want to do is kick all the Palestinians out. Openly saying it. So this mission has changed from self-defense to actually ethnic cleansing. That's my problem with it.
And that should tell you right there that wasn't the goal all along, that they needed a 9/11, so they needed October 7th to implement their plans. They have wanted this. They want that land. They want the Sinai Peninsula back. Like, they want all of that area, the Greater Israel Project. That's what they want. And they're saying it out loud, which should tell you that they used October 7th, why there was a stand down, why they did not do anything. They let it happen. It was allowed to happen, which to me says that it had to be planned with either Hamas or their ISIS, the ISIS members they've hired. Like, they had to allow that to happen. So that means that there was a coordination. There was a coordination with either Hamas or the ISIS fighters, no matter how you try to spin this. And because that's what they wanted to do, was ethnically cleanse Gaza. So if they needed Gaza ethnically cleansed, and they had a 2-year project with the Kushner and Witkoff for this master plan, They needed a false flag in order to do that. So make it make sense. Like, do you see any other way than they allowed it to happen? I mean, even Charlie Kirk questioning, like, why did they stand down for up to 20 hours in some areas? Because they wanted it so that they could do what they are doing. So I think this is almost over.
These are Democratic politicians who are not controlling the war. Have you heard the Prime Minister? Have you heard members of the War Cabinet? Have you heard them talking about ethnically cleansing the Gazan population? People like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir.
He's the finance minister. He's the equivalent of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, for goodness sake.
He's not involved in the decision-making.
He's not involved. Come on, Colonel Kemp, take your blinkers off, man.
And
you don't think Smotrich is involved in anything that's happening? What a ludicrous statement. I'm sorry.
He is not
I have great
involved
respect
in
for you and your military career, but what a ridiculous statement. Seriously.
And the other point that you made is that Israel is not achieving its objective. It is achieving its objectives. It's taken a very long time. It's been terrible. It's taken a long time. It's a very complex war. It's very difficult. They've destroyed huge elements of Hamas. I said before, maybe around 25 to 30,000 of them, which is not far off the number they started with. And also, they are having hostage release. You said they've been released only through diplomatic means. How did those diplomatic means come about? Through military pressure.
Okay.
That's how it happens.
Here's,
and they
can
need
I
to
finish
continue.
off with one
final
quote,
word, Wajah.
Final quote. What we're doing in Gaza now is a war of devastation, indiscriminate, limitless, cruel, and criminal killing of civilians. We're not doing this due to loss of control in any specific sector, not due to some disproportionate outbursts by some soldiers in one unit. Rather, it's the result of government policy, knowingly, evilly, maliciously, irresponsibly dictated. Yes, Israel is committing war crimes. And that's a quote from former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert.
Yeah.
And I agree.
It is true. And I interviewed him and he reiterated that to me.
He's wrong.
All right, I've got to leave it. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for the debate. We ran late with the minister who was running late herself, but I appreciate you.
So, no matter how you slice it, this is something that they wanted to happen, they allowed to happen, and they are going to finish it so that they can have their Greater Israel project, so that they can have that land, and so that Kushner and Witkoff can go in there and make the Trump family and all his buddies and cronies and everything else tons and tons of money, billions of dollars. There's natural gas there, there's oil there. Like, this is prime real estate for them. So I hope that their properties are cursed for all of eternity for building it over the bodies of dead babies and justifying making billions of dollars on the murder of children. The people that can live with that and do that are the most disgusting human beings alive. And they're your government right now, your administration. It makes me sick. But anyways, I want to know what you guys think in the comments. Please let me know. Like, was there a moment where you were supportive like Piers and supported what was going on, and then you started to like ask questions and change your stance? Or are you still pro-Israel? And, I won't agree with you, but no judgment. I just want to have the conversation. I want to know, like, what was the turning point for you if you did change, or what would it take for you to realize what's going on right now and change your stance if you haven't yet? I'm very curious. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching another video. Please subscribe if you like this kind of content. And also, I do have a community over at altmiddlepodcast.com. Go over there and sign up. And right now, if you use the code MIDDLE, you can get 6 months free, so you can comment, make posts, help me source stories, give me videos to watch and look at, and just hang out and get to know other people that are in the middle. And we're leaving the two-party system. We're done with this bullshit, and we're going to try to move everybody to the middle, because right now this issue is on both sides. This is a uniting a moment to unite together over a common cause and go after the common enemy that we actually do have, our government and the Israeli government. Excuse me. And on that, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Caught in the hold of a Zionist trap. No red, no blue, no tether, no trap. flagless wind is where we're wrong. We're not left, we're not right, we're wrong.
Chains on our minds, they try to bind, but we've got fire in our bloodline.
We are the all middle, the ones who won't settle. No puppet strings, no kings, no lies.
Politically homeless, watch us rise. No foreign hands, no steel on our wrist. We're the shadows, the rebels, the clenched fist. They whisper rules and a silver tongue, but their empire's a song unsung. We've got no crowns, no lords to obey. Marching through night, we'll find our own way. They built their walls, but we won't crawl where the crack in the monoliths fall.
We are the off middle, the ones who won't settle. No puppet strings, no kings, no lies.
Politically homeless, watch us rise. No foreign hands, no steel on our wrists. We're the shadows, the rebels, the clenched fist.